Princess Eloin of Solforia stood before the ancient summoning circle, her emerald eyes fixed on the swirling patterns of light that danced across its surface. The air crackled with arcane energy, and the very walls of the crystal palace seemed to hum with anticipation. This was it, the moment that would change everything. "Are you certain about this, Your Highness?" asked Kalar, the royal advisor. His weathered face was etched with concern as he watched the young princess prepare for the ritual. Eloin nodded, her silver hair shimmering in the ethereal light. "We have no choice, Kalar. The void blight grows stronger by the day. If we don't summon a creature of immense magical power to help us, Solforia will fall." With a deep breath, Eloin began to chant the words of power, her voice resonating through the chamber. The runes etched into the floor blazed to life, and a vortex of energy swirled upward, tearing at the fabric of reality itself. But something was wrong. The vortex pulsed erratically, its color shifting from a deep purple to an angry red. Eloin's eyes widened in alarm as she realized the ritual was spiraling out of control. "Princess," Kayla shouted, reaching out to pull her away from the circle, but it was too late. With a deafening crack, the vortex imploded, and a figure tumbled out onto the polished crystal floor. As the dust settled, Eloin and Kayla stared in disbelief at the result of their summoning. It wasn't the majestic, otherworldly creature they had hoped for. Instead, sprawled before them was a human man, dressed in strange clothes and looking utterly bewildered. The man groaned, pushing himself up to a sitting position. He blinked, taking in his surroundings with wide-eyed amazement. Where am I?" Eloin approached cautiously, her hand hovering over the hilt of her ceremonial dagger. "Who are you, stranger? How did you come to be here?" The man scrambled to his feet, his brown eyes darting between Eloin and Kayla. "I'm Max Novak, and I have absolutely no idea how I got here. Last thing I remember, I was in my apartment in New York, working on my laptop." Kayla's brow furrowed. "New York? Is that some distant realm beyond the celestial veil?" Max laughed nervously. "Oh, no, it's a city on Earth. You know, the planet. Look, I think there's been some kind of mistake. Can you just point me to the nearest exit, and I'll be on my way?" Eloin exchanged a troubled glance with Kayla. This was not at all what they had planned. The ritual was supposed to summon a being of immense magical power, not some confused human from a world they'd never even heard of. "I'm afraid it's not that simple, Max Novak," Eloin said, her voice tinged with regret. "You've been brought to the world of Solforia by our summoning ritual, and I fear you may be trapped here." Max's face paled. "Trapped? What do you mean, trapped? There's got to be a way to send me back." Before Eloin could respond, the chamber doors burst open. A group of palace guards rushed in, led by a tall, imposing figure clad in ornate armor. It was General Vexus, commander of the Solforian military and Eloin's chief rival for the throne. "What is the meaning of this?" Vexus demanded, his piercing gaze fixed on Max. "I felt the surge of magical energy from across the palace. Princess Eloin, explain yourself at once." Eloin stepped forward, placing herself between Max and the newcomers. "General Vexus, I can explain. We were attempting to summon aid against the void blight, but the ritual, it didn't go as planned." Vexus's eyes narrowed as he studied Max. "So instead of a powerful magical ally, you've brought us this, human." He spat the word as if it left a foul taste in his mouth. "This is treason, princess. You've endangered our entire realm with your reckless actions." "Now hold on just a minute," Max interjected, finding his voice despite the surreal situation. "I didn't ask to be brought here. If anyone's a victim in all this, it's me." The general's hand went to the hilt of his sword. "Silence, human. You will speak only when spoken to." Eloin raised her hand, her voice taking on a commanding tone that belied her years. "Enough, General. This man is under my protection. Until we understand exactly what has happened and how to reverse it, he will remain here in the palace as my guest." Vexus's face contorted with barely contained rage. "This is madness, Princess. The Council of Elders will hear of this, mark my words." With a sharp gesture to his guards, he turned and stormed out of the chamber. As the echoes of Vexus's footsteps faded, Max turned to Eloin, his expression a mix of confusion and growing fear. "Okay, can someone please tell me what's going on? Void Blight, Council of Elders, and why does that guy look like he wants to skewer me?" Eloin sighed, the weight of her decision settling heavily upon her shoulders. "It's a long story, Max Novak, but I fear you've been drawn into a conflict that threatens the very existence of our world. And somehow, against all odds, you may be our only hope." As Max looked around the crystal chamber, taking in the alien architecture and the swirling magical energies that still lingered in the air, he realized that his life had changed irrevocably. Whatever journey lay ahead, there would be no going back to his ordinary life on Earth. For better or worse, his fate was now intertwined with that of this strange, magical world called Holphoria. Max Novak stood on the balcony of the Crystal Palace, gazing out at the alien landscape of Holphoria. Floating islands drifted lazily through the lavender sky, connected by shimmering bridges of pure energy. In the distance, he could see vast forests of bioluminescent trees, their leaves pulsing with an otherworldly glow. It had been 3 days since the failed summoning ritual that had yanked him from his apartment in New York and deposited him in this strange world. 3 days of confusion, wonder, and growing unease. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Princess Eloin's voice startled him from his reverie. She joined him at the balcony railing, her silver hair catching the light of Holphoria's twin suns. Max nodded, still struggling to find words to describe the alien beauty before him. "It's like nothing I've ever seen. But it's not home," Eloin finished for him, her emerald eyes filled with sympathy. "Yeah," Max sighed. "Don't get me wrong, this place is incredible. But I can't help feeling like I don't belong here. And from what I've seen of General Vexus, I'm not exactly welcome." Eloin's expression hardened at the mention of the general's name. "Vexus has always been difficult, but his hostility towards you is more than just xenophobia. He sees you as a threat to his ambitions." Max raised an eyebrow. "Me? A threat? I'm just a software engineer from Earth. I don't know the first thing about magic or court politics." "Perhaps that's precisely why you're dangerous," came a new voice. Max turned to see Kalar approaching, the old advisor's robes shimmering with arcane symbols. "You represent an unknown factor, Max Novak. In the delicate balance of Sulphurian politics, unknowns are problematic." Before Max could respond, a tremor shook the palace. In the distance, a plume of sickly purple energy erupted from the forest. "The Void Blight," Eloin whispered, her face pale. "It's spreading faster than we anticipated." Max gripped the balcony railing, steadying himself. "Okay, I think it's time someone filled me in on what exactly this Void Blight is, and why you thought summoning some magical creature would help." Eloin and Kayla exchanged glances. Finally, the princess nodded. "You're right, Max. You deserve to know the full truth of the situation you've been drawn into." Over the next hour, as they walked through the twisting corridors of the palace, Eloin and Kayla explained the dire situation facing Sulphoria. The Void Blight, they said, was a corruptive force that had appeared several months ago. It consumed magic, turning lush landscapes into barren wastelands and draining the life force from any living creature it touched. "Our scientists and mages have been working tirelessly to find a solution," Kayla explained, his weathered face grave. "But nothing we've tried has been able to stop its spread. That's why we attempted the summoning ritual." Max frowned, processing the information. "But why me? I mean, I'm flattered and all, but I'm about as magical as a brick. How am I supposed to help fight this magical cancer?" Eloin stopped walking, turning to face Max directly. "That's just it, Max. We don't know. The ritual was supposed to summon a being of immense magical power. Instead, it brought you, a human from a world without magic. There must be a reason, even if we can't see it yet. As they rounded a corner, they nearly collided with General Vexus and a group of his supporters. The general's eyes narrowed as he saw Max. "Still entertaining this outsider, princess?" Vexus sneered. "While you play host, the void blight grows stronger. The people grow restless. They demand action, not distractions." His gaze lingered on Max, filled with contempt. Max felt a surge of anger. He had enough of being treated like an unwelcome intruder. "Look, General, I get that you don't like me. But from what I understand, your world is in danger. Shouldn't you be focused on finding a solution instead of playing political games?" A tense silence fell over the corridor. Vexus's hand moved to the hilt of his sword, but Elowen stepped between them. "Enough," she said, her voice carrying the weight of royal authority. "General Vexus, I understand your concerns, but I believe Max's presence here is not a coincidence. We must explore every possibility if we're to save Solforia." Vexus's jaw clenched, but he bowed stiffly. "As you wish, princess. But know this, the Council of Elders grows impatient. If you cannot prove the worth of your guest soon, they may take matters into their own hands." With that, he and his entourage swept past them. As they continued their walk, Max's mind raced. He was a stranger in a strange land, caught in the middle of a magical crisis and political power struggle. But beneath his fear and confusion, a spark of determination began to grow. "All right," he said, turning to Elowen and Kayla. "I may not have magic, but I do have skills. Back on Earth, I specialized in problem-solving and data analysis. If there's any way I can help fight this void blight, I want to try." Elowen's face lit up with hope. "Thank you, Max. Perhaps your unique perspective is exactly what we need. Come, there's someone I think you should meet." She led them to a secluded part of the palace, where a door shimmered into existence at her touch. As it swung open, Max's jaw dropped. Inside was a vast chamber filled with a dizzying array of magical artifacts and what looked like highly advanced technology. Holographic displays flickered alongside ancient tomes, and in the center of it all stood a figure unlike any Max had seen before. "Max Novak," Elowen said, "meet Zira, our chief arcanotechnician. If anyone can help us understand why you're here and how to stop the void blight, it's her." Zira turned, her multifaceted eyes scanning Max with obvious curiosity. She appeared to be a fusion of organic and mechanical parts, with iridescent scales covering half her body and gleaming cybernetic enhancements on the other. "Fascinating," Zira said, her voice a melodious hum. "A human from a non-magical realm. Your presence here defies all known laws of interdimensional summoning. I look forward to studying you thoroughly." As Max looked around the chamber, filled with wonders beyond his wildest imagination, he realized that his adventure in Solforia was only just beginning. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he was determined to face them head-on for the sake of this strange new world and for his chance to return home. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity for Max. Under Zira's guidance, he immersed himself in the study of Solforian magic and technology, searching for any clue that might explain his presence or help combat the void blight. "Remarkable," Zira hummed, her multifaceted eyes gleaming as she examined the results of their latest experiment. "Your body seems to absorb and neutralize magical energy at an unprecedented rate." Max looked up from a holographic display he'd been puzzling over. "Is that good?" Zira's mechanical parts whirred as she considered. "It's certainly unique. In theory, it could make you resistant to the effects of the void blight, but it also means you're incapable of wielding magic yourself." "Story of my life," Max muttered. Always the immune carrier, never the superhero. Their banter was interrupted by the arrival of Princess Elowen, her face drawn with worry. "We have a problem," she announced. "The void blight has breached the outer defenses. It's advancing on the city." Zira's scales rippled with alarm. "So soon? Our models predicted we had at least another week before." "The models were wrong," Elowen cut in. We need solutions now. Max's mind raced. Over the past weeks, he'd pored over data on the Void Blight's spread, looking for patterns his Earth-trained eyes might spot that the Colphorians had missed. Something had been nagging at him, a suspicion he'd been reluctant to voice. "I think I might have an idea," he said slowly, "but you're not going to like it." All eyes turned to him as Max pulled up a series of charts on the holographic display. "Look at these spread patterns. They're too regular, too engineered. I don't think the Void Blight is a natural phenomenon. I think someone's controlling it." A heavy silence fell over the room. Finally, Keller spoke, his voice heavy. "You're suggesting sabotage, treason of the highest order." Max nodded grimly. "I know it sounds crazy, but the data doesn't lie. Someone with intimate knowledge of Sulphuria's defenses is guiding the Blight, exploiting weaknesses, avoiding our strongest countermeasures." Elowen's eyes flashed with a mixture of anger and determination. "If you're right, Max, then we're not just fighting a magical plague. We're facing an enemy within our own ranks." "But who would do such a thing?" Zira asked, her mechanical limbs twitching with agitation. "Who stands to gain from Sulphuria's destruction?" The answer hit Max like a thunderbolt. "Power," he said. "Someone who thinks they can control the Blight, use it to reshape Sulphuria in their image." He turned to Elowen. "Someone who's been awfully insistent that I don't belong here." Elowen's face paled. General Vexus. As if summoned by his name, alarms blared throughout the palace. The floor shook with the impact of distant explosions. "We're under attack," Kayla shouted, steadying himself against a console. Zola's fingers flew over a control panel, bringing up security feeds from around the palace. The images showed chaos, royal guards fighting against their own comrades, tendrils of void energy seeping through cracks in the crystal walls. "It's a coup," Elowen breathed, her voice tight with shock and anger. "Vexus is making his move." Max's mind raced. Everything was happening too fast. He was just a software engineer from Earth, caught in the middle of an alien civil war. But as he looked at the faces of Elowen, Zira, and Keller, people who had become his friends in this strange world, he knew he couldn't stand idly by. "We need to stop him," Max said, surprising himself with the determination in his voice. "If Vexus is behind the Void Blight, he must have a way to control it. Find that, and we might be able to stop this." Elowen nodded, her royal training kicking in as she took charge of the situation. "Zira, lock down the Arcanotech lab. We can't let Vexus's forces get their hands on our research. Kayla, send word to our loyalists in the city. We'll need all the help we can get." "What about you?" Max asked, feeling utterly out of his depth. Elowen's eyes met his, filled with a fierce resolve. "You and I, Max, are going to confront Vexus directly. Your immunity to magic might be our only advantage." As they rushed through the corridors of the embattled palace, dodging skirmishes and helping loyal guards where they could, Max felt a surreal sense of déjà vu. It was like every sci-fi movie he'd ever watched, except this time he was living it. They reached the grand throne room to find it in chaos. General Vexus stood before the ancient seat of Sulphurian power, wielding a staff that pulsed with the same sickly purple energy as the Void Blight. Around him, reality itself seemed to warp and twist. "Ah, Princess," Vexus sneered as they entered. "Come to witness the dawn of a new era for Sulphuria, one free from the weak rule of your family." "Stand down, Vexus," Elowen commanded, her voice ringing with authority despite the madness surrounding them. "You're destroying everything you claim to protect." Vexus laughed, a sound that sent chills down Max's spine. "Destruction? No, my dear princess. This is rebirth. The Void Blight is the key to ultimate power. With it, I will reshape Sulphuria into a true empire, one that will dominate all the realms." As Vexus ranted, Max's eyes were drawn to the staff in his hands. The crystal at its tip looked familiar. It was the same material as the summoning circle that had brought him to Sulphuria. In that moment, everything clicked into place. The failed summoning, his strange immunity to magic, Vexus's plans. It was all connected. Eloan, Max whispered urgently. I think I know how to stop this, but you're going to have to trust me. The princess glanced at him, then back at the deranged general. With a barely perceptible nod, she said, Whatever you're planning, Max, do it now. Taking a deep breath, Max stepped forward, directly into the swirling vortex of void energy surrounding Vexus. The general's eyes widened in shock as the purple tendrils seemed to recoil from Max's presence. Impossible, Vexus snarled. No one can resist the void. Max grinned, feeling the strange energy dissipate around him. Guess I didn't get that memo. With a roar of frustration, Vexus lunged at Max, bringing the staff down in a vicious arc. But Max was ready. He grabbed the staff, feeling a jolt of energy course through him as his hands closed around the crystal. For a moment, the throne room was filled with blinding light. Max felt as if he was being torn apart and put back together, every cell in his body screaming in protest. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, it was over. The void energy vanished. Vexus stumbled back, his staff now nothing more than an ordinary piece of wood. And Max felt different, energized, as if he'd unlocked something hidden deep within himself. As royal guards rushed in to apprehend the stunned Vexus, Eloan approached Max, her eyes wide with wonder. Max, your hands, they're glowing. Max looked down to see a soft golden light emanating from his palms. He flexed his fingers, feeling the crackle of energy, not void, but something purer, more natural, dancing across his skin. I think, he said slowly, a smile spreading across his face, I finally figured out why I'm here. As the chaos of the failed coup subsided around them, Max realized that his adventure in Sulfuria was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. In the days following Vexus's failed coup, Sulfuria teetered on the brink of chaos. The void blight, while no longer actively spreading, had left vast swaths of the realm corrupted and uninhabitable. The revelation of Vexus's treachery had shaken the populace's faith in their leadership, and whispers of revolution echoed through the crystal spires of the capital. Max found himself at the center of it all, struggling to understand and control his newly awakened powers. Under Zira's guidance, he spent hours each day in the Arcanotech lab, learning to channel the golden energy that now coursed through his veins. Fascinating, Zira hummed, her multifaceted eyes whirring as she analyzed the data from their latest experiment. It appears that your Earth physiology, combined with the energy from the Void Staff, has created an entirely new form of magic, one that seems to have restorative properties. Max flexed his fingers, watching as golden sparks danced between them. So, what you're saying is, I'm basically a human battery for good vibes. Zira's mechanical parts clicked in what Max had come to recognize as her version of laughter. A crude analogy, but not entirely inaccurate. Your energy seems to counteract the corrupting influence of the void blight. In theory, you could use it to heal the damaged areas of Sulfuria. Before Max could respond, the lab doors slid open, and Princess Eloan strode in. The past few days had taken their toll on her. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her silver hair was tied back in a messy knot. But her emerald gaze was as sharp and determined as ever. We have a problem, she announced without preamble. The Council of Elders has called for an emergency session. They're questioning my fitness to rule in light of recent events. Max's heart sank. Despite everything they'd been through, despite stopping Vexus and halting the spread of the void blight, Eloan's position was still precarious. What can we do? He asked. Eloan's lips pressed into a thin line. We need to prove that we have a plan to restore Sulfuria, to heal the damage done by the void blight, and we need to do it quickly. All eyes turned to Max. He swallowed hard, suddenly feeling the weight of an entire world's expectations on his shoulders. I don't know if I'm ready. I'm still learning how to control these powers. Zora's scales rippled with excitement. But don't you see? This is the perfect opportunity to test the full extent of your abilities. If you can demonstrate your power to heal the land before the Council, It could change everything. Max looked to Elowen, seeing the mixture of hope and uncertainty in her eyes. He'd thought of everything she'd done for him since his arrival in Solforia, how she defended him against Vex's accusations and trusted him even when it seemed crazy to do so. He owed her this much, at least. "All right," he said, squaring his shoulders. "Let's do this, but we're going to need a plan." The next few hours were a whirlwind of preparation. Zero worked tirelessly to create a device that would amplify Max's healing energy, while Kala briefed them on the political minefields they'd have to navigate in the council chamber. As they made their way to the grand hall where the council awaited, Max felt his nerves threatening to overwhelm him. "What if this doesn't work?" he whispered to Elowen. "What if I'm not strong enough?" Elowen's hand found his, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "You are strong enough, Max. You've faced every challenge this world has thrown at you with courage and ingenuity. Whatever happens in there, we face it together." The doors to the council chamber swung open, revealing a semicircle of stern-faced elders seated on crystalline thrones. At the center sat Archon Zilith, the head of the council, her ancient face etched with lines of worry and suspicion. "Princess Elowen," Zilith's voice echoed through the chamber. "You stand before this council accused of gross negligence in the face of the Void Blight crisis. How do you answer these charges?" Elowen stepped forward, her head held high. "Honored elders, I do not deny that mistakes were made, but I stand before you now with a solution, a way to heal our land and our people." Murmurs rippled through the assembled elders. Zilith leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "And what solution might that be, Princess?" This was it. Max took a deep breath and stepped up beside Elowen. "That would be me," he said, his voice steadier than he felt. The murmurs grew louder. "The human." One elder scoffed. "The very one whose presence here caused such turmoil." "Respectfully, Elder," Max replied, "my presence here was no accident. I was brought to Solforia for a reason, to help save it." With a nod to Zira, Max activated the amplification device. Golden light blazed from his hands, filling the chamber with warmth. The elders gasped, shielding their eyes from the brilliance. "What you see before you is a new form of magic," Elowen explained, her voice ringing with conviction. "One capable of counteracting the void blight and restoring life to our corrupted lands." To demonstrate, Zira brought forward a sample of void-corrupted crystal. Max placed his hands on it, channeling his energy. Before the astounded eyes of the council, the sickly purple taint receded, leaving the crystal gleaming and pure once more. "Impossible," Zilith breathed, leaning forward to examine the transformed crystal. "Not impossible," Max said, feeling a surge of confidence. "Just improbable. But then again, so is a human from Earth ending up in Solforia. Sometimes the most unlikely solutions are exactly what we need." For a long moment, silence reigned in the council chamber. Then, slowly, Zilith rose to her feet. "Princess Elowen, you have indeed presented us with an unprecedented situation. The council will need time to deliberate on this new development." As the elders filed out to consider their decision, Max felt the adrenaline that had carried him through the demonstration begin to fade. He swayed slightly, steadied by Elowen's hand on his arm. "You did it," she whispered, her eyes shining with a mixture of relief and admiration. "Whatever they decide, you gave them hope. You gave all of Solforia hope." Max managed a tired smile. "We did it," he corrected her. "I wouldn't be here without you, Elowen. Whatever happens next, we're in this together." As they waited for the council's decision, Max realized that he no longer felt like an outsider in this strange, magical world. Somewhere along the way, Solforia had become more than just the place he'd been accidentally summoned to. It had become a home worth fighting for. The fate of a realm hung in the balance, and Max Novak, former software engineer from Earth, now wielder of a magic beyond imagination, stood ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. For Solforia, for Elowen, and for the incredible journey that had brought him to this moment. The council's deliberations stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Max paced the antechamber, golden sparks occasionally crackling from his fingertips as his anxiety mounted. Elowen stood by the window, her gaze fixed on the distant horizon where patches of void-corrupted land still marred the landscape. "What if they don't believe in me?" Max murmured, more to himself than anyone else. "What if they think I'm too much of a risk?" Zira, who had been tinkering with the amplification device, looked up. "They would be fools to dismiss you, Max. Your abilities represent our best hope for healing Solthoria." Before anyone could respond, the doors to the council chamber swung open. Kayla emerged, his face unreadable. "They're ready for you," he said simply. As they re-entered the grand hall, Max felt the weight of every elder's gaze upon him. Archon Zilith sat forward on her crystalline throne, her ancient eyes seeming to pierce right through him. "Max Novak of Earth," she began, her voice echoing through the chamber. "Your arrival in our realm has brought great change and no small amount of turmoil. Yet you have also shown great courage and a willingness to risk everything for a world not your own." Max swallowed hard, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Zilith continued, "The Council has decided that your unique abilities represent our best hope for combating the lingering effects of the Void Blight. However," she paused, her gaze shifting to Elowen, "we require proof that these powers can work on a larger scale before we can fully endorse Princess Elowen's plan." Elowen stepped forward. "What sort of proof do you require, Archon?" "A test," Zilith replied. "You will journey to the heart of the largest void-corrupted zone. If Max Novak can purify that area, we will accept him as Solthoria's savior and support your claim to the throne, Princess Elowen." Murmurs rippled through the assembled elders. Max's mind raced. The largest corrupted zone was a vast, twisted landscape that had once been the fertile Lumina Valley. Could his powers really cleanse an area that size? "We accept your challenge, Archon," Elowen declared before Max could voice his doubts. She turned to him, her emerald eyes filled with trust. "We can do this, Max, together." The next few days were a blur of preparation. Zero worked tirelessly to improve the amplification device, pushing the limits of Arcanotech to boost Max's healing energy. Kayla pored over ancient texts, searching for any forgotten lore that might aid them in their quest. As for Max, he spent every waking moment honing his control over his new abilities. He pushed himself to the brink of exhaustion, determined not to let Elowen or Solthoria down. Finally, the day of their expedition arrived. As they stood at the edge of the Lumina Valley, Max felt his breath catch in his throat. The once lush landscape was now a twisted nightmare of pulsing void energy and corrupted flora. The very air seemed to shimmer with malevolent purpose. "It's worse than I imagined," Elowen whispered, her face pale. Max nodded grimly. "But we have to try. Fuck Solthoria." They made their way into the heart of the corruption, Zira's sensors guiding them towards the epicenter. As they walked, Max could feel the void energy pressing against him, trying to seep into his very being. But his unique physiology held firm, creating a bubble of protection around their small group. At last, they reached the center of the valley. Here, the corruption was so thick it seemed almost solid, a writhing mass of purple-black energy that hurt the eyes to look at directly. "This is it," Zira announced, her mechanical limbs whirring with tension. "The source of the corruption. If we can purify this, the rest should follow." Max took a deep breath, centering himself as he'd practiced countless times over the past days. "Okay, let's do this." He raised his hands, golden light blazing from his palms as Zira activated the amplification device. The healing energy poured forth, clashing with the void corruption in a spectacular display of light and power. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The corruption pushed back, resisting Max's attempts to purify it. Sweat beaded on his brow as he poured more and more energy into the effort. "It's not working," he gritted out, feeling his strength beginning to wane. But then Elowen was there, her hand on his shoulder. "Don't give up, Max. Remember why we're here. Remember all the people counting on us." Her touch seemed to ignite something within him. Max felt a surge of power unlike anything he'd experienced before. The golden light intensified, pushing back the corruption with renewed force. Slowly, agonizingly, the void energy began to recede. Patches of healthy earth appeared, then grew larger. Corrupted plants straightened, their natural colors returning. The very air seemed to clear, the oppressive weight of the void lifting. Max poured everything he had into the effort, drawing strength from Elowen's unwavering support and the thought of all those depending on him. With a final, monumental push, he sent a wave of golden energy sweeping across the entire valley. The last tendrils of void corruption evaporated, leaving behind a landscape transformed. Where once there had been only twisted ruin, now vibrant grass began to sprout. The first tentative blooms of flowers pushed through the soil, reaching for the sun. As the golden light faded, Max stumbled, utterly spent. Elowen caught him, lowering him gently to the ground. "You did it, Max," she said, her voice filled with awe and joy. "You saved the valley. You saved Thalforia." Max managed a weak smile, looking out over the rejuvenated landscape. "We did it," he corrected her. "I couldn't have done any of this without you, Elowen, without all of you." As they made their way back to the capital, news of their success spreading like wildfire, Max realized that he had found something he never expected when he was pulled from his ordinary life on Earth. He had found a purpose, a place where his unique abilities could make a real difference. The journey wasn't over. There was still much of Thalforia to heal, and undoubtedly new challenges to face. But as Max looked at Elowen, Zira, and Kayla, he knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. Human in an alien world he might be, but Max Novak had found his home among the crystal spires and magical wonders of Thalforia, and he was ready for whatever adventure awaited them next. The return to the capital was nothing short of triumphant. Word of Max and Elowen's success in the Lumina Valley had spread faster than wildfire, carried by magical communications, and the excited chatter of citizens who had witnessed the distant glow of Max's healing light. As their transport crystal glided through the streets, crowds gathered to cheer and throw shimmering petals in their path. Max, still weary from his monumental effort, found himself overwhelmed by the outpouring of gratitude and hope. "I've never seen anything like this," he murmured to Elowen, who sat beside him, her hand resting supportively on his arm. She smiled, her emerald eyes shining with pride. "You've given them something they'd almost lost, Max. Hope, a future free from the shadow of the void blight." Their arrival at the palace was met with an even greater reception. The Council of Elders, led by Archon Zilith, awaited them in the grand courtyard. As Max and Elowen descended from the transport, a hush fell over the assembled crowd. Zilith stepped forward, her ancient face etched with an emotion Max had never seen there before, humility. "Max Novak of Earth," she intoned, her voice carrying across the courtyard. "You have done what many thought impossible. You have cleansed the heart of the void's corruption and proven yourself a true hero of Thalforia." She turned to Elowen. "And you, Princess Elowen, have shown wisdom beyond your years in recognizing the potential in our unexpected visitor. The Council hereby affirms your right to ascend to the throne." A cheer went up from the crowd, a sound of pure joy and relief that seemed to make the very crystal spires of the palace resonate. Max felt a lump form in his throat, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the moment. But their victory celebration was short-lived. As the cheers began to die down, a messenger rushed forward, his face pale with urgency. He whispered something to Kayla, whose expression grew grave. "What is it?" Elowen asked, immediately alert. Kayla stepped forward, his voice low but urgent. "Your Highness, we've received reports from the outer provinces. While the heart of the void blight has been cleansed, there are still pockets of corruption scattered throughout the realm. And there are signs that some of Vexus's loyalists are attempting to harness these remnants for their own purposes." A tense silence fell over the group. Max felt a mixture of exhaustion and determination settle over him. "So it's not over," he said, more a statement than a question. Elowen straightened, every inch the ruler she was destined to be. No, it's not over. But thanks to you, Max, we now have the means to fight back, to truly heal our world. She turned to address the crowd and the council. People of Solforia, we have won a great victory today, but our work is far from finished. The road ahead will not be easy, but together, we will rebuild our realm stronger than ever before. Her gaze met Max's, and he saw in her eyes a question and a promise. Without hesitation, he stepped forward to stand beside her. Whatever comes next, he said, his voice carrying across the courtyard, I'm with you. All of you. Solforia gave me a home when I was lost between worlds. Now it's my turn to help Solforia find its way forward. The days and weeks that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Max, with Zira's help, began training others in the use of the amplification devices, creating teams of healers who could tackle the remaining pockets of void corruption. Elowen, now officially crowned as queen, threw herself into the work of rebuilding the government and rooting out the last of Vexus's collaborators. Through it all, Max found himself growing ever more integrated into the fabric of Solforian society. His unique perspective as an outsider, combined with his newfound magical abilities, made him an invaluable advisor to Elowen and a bridge between the old ways and the new. One evening, as they stood on the balcony of the palace, overlooking a city that glowed with renewed life and purpose, Elowen turned to Max with a soft smile. Do you ever miss it? She asked. Your old life on Earth. Max considered the question, watching the shimmer of magic in the air and feeling the gentle hum of energy that now constantly flowed through him. Sometimes, he admitted, but then I look around at all we've accomplished, at the difference we're making, and I know I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Elowen's hand found his, their fingers intertwining. I'm glad you're here, Max Novak. Solforia is better for having you. As they stood there, watching the twin suns of Solforia set in a blaze of color, Max reflected on the incredible journey that had brought him to this moment. From an ordinary software engineer to a hero of an alien world, he had found purpose, friendship, and perhaps even love in the most unexpected of places. The challenges ahead were many. There were still corrupted areas to cleanse, political intrigues to navigate, and the constant work of rebuilding a world shaken to its core. But as Max looked at Elowen, at the city spread out before them, and thought of the friends he'd made, Zira with her brilliant mind, Kayla with his steady wisdom, he knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. In the end, it wasn't magic that had saved Solforia. It was something far more powerful, the combination of human ingenuity, alien wisdom, and the unbreakable bonds forged in the face of adversity. As night fell on the crystal spires of the capital, Max Novak, once a stranger in a strange land, now a hero of two worlds, looked to the future with hope and determination. The story of Solforia's rebirth was just beginning, and he couldn't wait to see what the next chapter would bring.